Madam Speaker, I now move that we recognize the gentle lady from Party List Kusug, Tausug, Representative Shernee Tan for her privilege speech.
The representative from the party list Kusug Tausug, the Honorable Shernee Tan, is now recognized for her privileged speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise on a question of personal and collective privilege. Madam Speaker, my esteemed colleagues in this august chamber, ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today in my ardent desire to contribute to the noble intention of effecting changes in our country as the representative of the Kusug Tausug party list. When we talk of Mindanao today, what automatically comes into the discourse are matters of security, of fear, and of tragic displacement of people owing to clashes which is more criminal than ideological. This is a faraway cry from Mindanao and Sulu of the bygone days, where opportunities were aplenty and the region was replete with resources. This humble representation, therefore, is emboldened by the cries of the greater multitude wallowing in utter despair by rising incidences of poverty. Madam Speaker and my esteemed colleagues, I beg your indulgence to allow me to cite some facts and figures with the hope of shedding light to some issues and to view the situation in the ARMM region from a more noble perspective rather than the narrow lens of political patronage. Under President Aquino's watch, massive funds flowed profusely into the ARMM's coffer as its budget tripled from 10.4 billion in 2010 to 29.4 billion in 2016. In addition, billions of funds were released through national government agencies on top of financial assistance for Papaya and Pamana programs and from the International Bank for Reconstruction. The funds were supposedly intended to implement socio-economic programs and to support community development, regional infrastructure, and strengthening governance in the ARMM. Of these massive funds allotted and made available, Madam Speaker, allow me to share comparative figures and data that are equally massive, but only in terms of the magnitude of their sense and meaning. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, the ARMM remains the poorest region in the country, with poverty incidence among households of 53.4% in the first semester of 2015 from 46.9% in the same period in 2012. At least 11% of 5.1 million poorest households are in Maguindanao, Lanao del Sur, Basilan, Tawi-Tawi, and Sulu, which comprise the ARMM according to the 2015 National Household Targeting System for Poverty Reduction. Madam Speaker, this humble representation calls upon this august chamber to be analytical on the data cited and look for the true meaning hidden in the charts of poverty incidences. It is worthy to mention that despite of being autonomous, ARMM receives approximately 98% of its operating revenue from the national government and in return contributes a measly 0.74% to the country's gross domestic product. The World Bank noted in a study that the ARMM suffers from inadequate basic services and poor infrastructures, poor local governance, and a weak private sector. The World Bank recommended solutions, among others, to improve governance and strengthen institutions, particularly in conflict-affected areas, by recognizing the efforts of local officials in the components of ARMM who promoted transparency and accountability in the implementation of projects. This humble representation, who is a native of Sulu, is groping even just for an outline in the bleak circumstance in my region that may give semblance of a figure or a form from which to demand a response from, or one who can give rhyme and reason on the glaring disparity between funds allocated and the rising incidences of poverty. This is a mismatch by any proportion. The great nationalist and African patriot Nelson Mandela once said, "Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings." Are we not human, and should we not be humane? Madam Speaker, ARMM was sentenced by the Aquino administration as a failed experiment. Yet, in the twilight of the past administration, the ARMM received the biggest chunk ever. I cannot escape the analogy of a sick cow already destined to a slaughterhouse, yet fed abundantly beforehand to fatten its meat for additional gains for the sake of expediency. As a run-up to the 2016 national and local elections, there was a flurry of projects, especially construction of roads as if dictated by haste, and truly enough, haste makes waste. It is still uncertain if these roads meet the standards of construction. This representation eagerly awaits the comments and observations of the DPWH on this matter. This humble representation, therefore, was gravely alarmed when the ARMM proposed budget for 2017 as contained in the National Expenditure Program prepared by the previous administration further ballooned to 40.5 billion, or 4 times bigger than its budget in 2010. She then raised numerous issues during the budget hearings to elicit valid answers on why the ARMM's budget grew bigger and bigger every year, but the people continue to live in the quagmire of poverty. But this representation has kept her objections and other issues within the confines of the House of Representatives, as she undoubtedly keeps her trust and confidence in the leadership of this august chamber. I was terribly surprised, therefore, when I read in some national dailies that congressmen from ARMM even had the temerity to approach Senator Lacson to plead not to slash the 1.5 billion allegedly allocated for each of them. May I state for the record, Madam Speaker, that this representative of Kusug Tausug party list, which is based in Sulu, a core territory of the ARMM, was not among those House members who approached Senator Lacson. I therefore challenge, Madam Speaker, those congressmen from the ARMM who came to see Senator Lacson in his office to be brave enough to come forward and explain if they indeed plead for the retention of their respective allocation of 1.5 billion. As representatives of the ARMM, your actions certainly reflect the people of the ARMM. It is therefore just and proper that you give your side of the story, not only to protect the honor and dignity of the people you represent, but also to shield this hallowed institution from vicious criticisms. Madam Speaker, one of the essential things I learned during the budget hearings was contrary to the notion that the people in the ARMM have been overlooked, abandoned, or neglected, and left with budgetary crumbs that had pushed them to seek redress against the government. As a matter of fact, the ARMM is one of the most favored entities, having received billions of pesos from the government. It seems not superfluous to cite again that the ARMM budget has tripled from 2010 to 2016, even as the poverty incidence in the ARMM continues to decline, as if there was no economic intervention from the government. This situation, Madam Speaker, has caused the people in the ARMM to wonder, where are the billions? The Commission on Audit gave us hints as to where the billions of pesos allocated to the ARMM went. In its audit reports for the preceding years, COA revealed that there had been unliquidated cash advances, numerous anomalous purchases not supported with official receipts, questionable procurements, and allotments which still remain unaccounted for. During the budget hearings, I persistently requested for supporting documents from ARMM officials that will either refute or comply with the COA findings. But as of today, they have yet to fulfill their promise, as no single document was ever submitted to me or to the Committee on Appropriations. It is very apparent that officials of the ARMM have been showing a cavalier attitude in complying with the COA findings. This humble representation, however, heavily relied on the wisdom of the revered members of this august chamber when she voted yes to the proposed 2017 budget, as she strongly supports the noble objectives of President Rodrigo Roa Duterte to buttress peace and development efforts in the ARMM in order to free it from the enclave of penury and destitution to attain the most elusive peace in our land. Madam Speaker, poverty is not merely the absence of food on the table or absence of opportunities to earn a decent living. There are other absences or lack of them that compound the people's misery, like access to quality education through the construction of schools and additional classrooms, well-equipped government hospitals and ample rural health units, infrastructure facilities necessary for transport and marketing of agricultural products, air services, energy and telecommunications needs should also be looked into. The previously mentioned subjects are the competencies of the national government, which have already been devolved to ARMM. As honorable members of this august chamber, we are expected to place our nation's interests above petty political lines and personal agenda. Let us join hands to lift up the people of the ARMM before they drop further into the abyss of the very impoverished and the inconsequential. Let me then urge my colleagues in this august chamber to investigate this matter so that we can ferret out the truth behind the figures. We can right the wrong beneath the facts and redress the grievances of those whose honor and reputation may have been so grossly assailed and plug the bleeding of government coffers. Let me end this privileged speech with the undying words of the great Chinese philosopher Confucius. In a country well governed, poverty is something to be ashamed of. In a country badly governed, wealth is something to be ashamed of. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, my esteemed colleagues.
Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move that we refer the privileged speech of the Honorable Shernee to the Committee on Rules. So moved, Madam Speaker.
Is there any objection? The Chair hears none. The motion to refer the speech of the Honorable Tan to the appropriate committee is hereby approved. Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I